This podcast includes dark humor, violence, and adult themes. Content warnings can be found in the episode description. Welcome to the Scamverse, a small, absurd, and overlooked galaxy frequented by criminals, thieves, charlatans, podcast listeners, and other assorted ne'er-do-wells. This week's tale is Family Dining. First dates can be so complicated. And today, we are lucky to have a public service announcement from Scam University. Now on with the show. Family Dining. Zeboop Richardson ate lunch in the company break room and wrote in his notebook. He was purple, squat, and bookish with thick, smudged glasses. He used one tentacle to write in his notebook, another to scratch his head in thought, another to pop a horseradish and cheddar chip into his mouth, and another to brush chip crumbs off his chest. In furrowed concentration, Zeboop continued writing. My rules for planning the perfect date. Number 1, plan everything and every possible contingency. Spontaneity has no rule in dating. Number 2, last-minute decisions lead to disaster. Take time to prepare. It's better to wait and postpone multiple times if needed. Number 3, always wear business clothes. There's no such thing as informal. It's important to have your business suit cleaned and pressed. Number 4, know and vet where you're going. This will involve several weeks, if not months, of planning. It's not enough to pick a restaurant. You must go to the local library, research newspaper reviews, and if possible, speak to at least 5 to 19 sources who have dined there to ensure the restaurant meets standards. See subpart 6C. Number 5. Zeboop stared blankly at number 5. He had an idea earlier in the morning, but it had since vanished. He tapped the table in thought and shooed away a fly. Across from Zeboop, his friend Mox ate their lunch and looked around casually. Mox had curly brown hair and a friendly but mischievous glint in their eyes. Unlike Zeboop, Mox was tall and wiry and wore a bright-colored suit. They had gone to the same business college. While Zeboop planned and studied meticulously for exams, Mox thought the night before, or the morning of, or the walk to the classroom was the best time to start cracking a book. The pair of friends worked well together, with Zeboop keeping them grounded and Mox adding impulsive freedom and fun. Mox ate lunch and studied Zeboop. Hey Z, you don't need a 7-part system to ask a girl out on a date. I'm only up to 5 right now. I ask guys out all the time. It's easy. You walk up and you say, "Want to go out with me?" They say no. Sometimes, yeah, okay, but no, not always. And if they say no, you move on. Yeah, I just want to make sure I've tested all the processes first. They ate lunch and sat quietly. Occasionally, between bites of chips, Zeboop would nod his head, inwardly agreeing that he had a good idea of something, and then jot it down in his little notebook. Then Mox saw Pepper at the other corner of the cafeteria. To Mox, Pepper looked like a banana with stubby legs, and always had kind eyes. Mox also knew that Pepper was the object of Zeboop's captivation with date planning. Hey, Pepper! Mox waved her over. Zeboop nearly dropped his pencil. Pepper wobbled up to them. What's up, Mox? Hi, Zeboop. Zeboop gave Mox a sideways glare. Mox parried with an "I got this" half smile, then turned to Pepper. "There's this new restaurant that opened, Connor's. Zeboop, weren't you saying you wanted to check that place out?" Zeboop's jaw dropped as the color drained from his purple face. "You two should go check it out on Friday." Zeboop made an odd, strained sound like a wounded tea kettle. "Are you okay, Zeboop?" Want a dinner?"
Sure, it sounds like fun. Oh, wait, I have plans with my sister Friday. I'm sorry.
Zeboop was relieved that he could have more time to prepare for a date than just Friday. That sort of time crunch? Only 4 days to prepare? "Well, how about tonight? You have plans?"
Sure, tonight works. Later then.
Pepper smiled and wobbled back to her office. Zeboop stared at Mox with wide, saucer-shaped eyes of fear and dread. Mox smiled back. "Hey, you're welcome." Zeboop spent the afternoon trying to concentrate on his reports due tomorrow. He had been planning on working late tonight to finish them, but now he had a date with Pepper. Zeboop vacillated between wanting to hug or throttle Mox. Instead, Zeboop spent the afternoon asking Mox questions in their shared office. What type of suit should I wear?" "Oh, I'd say birthday if you're lucky." What reviews has this restaurant had? What cuisine do they serve?" "I have no idea whatsoever. I'm not even fully certain they're open yet." Clearly, Mox insisted on being no help whatsoever. But at the end of the workday, Mox kicked Zeboop's chair and spun him around. "This is good for you, Z. You can't plan out every little thing and every possible contingency. Don't wear a suit. Slacks and a clean shirt are fine. The place is new, so it's an adventure. And finally, your rules you write down for the perfect date?
Yeah?
They're bullshit. Sorry to say it, but it's total unmitigated bullshit. Nobody has ever had a perfect first date. Everyone gets nervous. Everyone. And not everything goes according to plan." Zeboop paled. "And that's okay. You will survive, okay? Would I ever mislead you?" For the record, over the years, Mox misled Zeboop 329 times. Connor's family dining bustled with families of all shapes, species, and sizes. Colorful posters and paintings created a warm and cheerful atmosphere. The tables were covered with red and white checkered cloths. A sense of controlled chaos permeated the air, with children running everywhere. Some were hobbling along with braces. Many were small, runts of the pack, one might think, given the large size of the adults. The children were free to run around as there were only chairs for adults. After taking their seat at a booth, Pepper spotted her division boss dining with her husband. They saw her and waved her over.
Oh, look, it's Mrs. Ferglop. I'm gonna go say hi real quick.
She smiled at Zeboop and wobbled away. The Ferglops were large insectoid creatures with wide mouths and small, squinting eyes. Plant-like, pulsating vines ran through their faces like veins. Mrs. Ferglop wore a pearl necklace and a nice floral print chiffon dress.
"We don't get out much with the kids, you know, but these are our little reasons."
She pointed at two small, pale insectoid figures that stood on tiptoe to reach the tabletop. The boy wore a little suit and the girl wore a little floral dress, much like her mother's. They both wore green and yellow bracelets on their wrists. which were popular at the time.
They're finally big enough to come here for dinner. I see you are here with, oh dear, what's his name? I always see him jotting down notes in his little notebook.
Zeboop Richardson.
Mrs. Furglop raised a crusted vine eyebrow.
So, is this a date, perhaps?
Perhaps. I'm not sold one way or the other yet, but I know he's a nice man.
Pepper blushed. Mrs. Furglop pointed to her husband.
Yes, I'm not sold one way or the other on this one, and we've been married 15 years.
She laughed and the floor shook. Mrs. Furglop placed a large claw on Pepper's thin hand.
We will let you get back to your maybe date. It was a pleasure seeing you outside the office, dear.
Pepper returned to her table, finding Zeboop frantically flipping through his notebook.
What you reading?
Oh, just looking up some things. Tonight was unexpected, but in a good way. I'm glad you're here.
He smiled at her, a genuine, kind smile.
I wonder what's on the menu. I'm famished. I didn't get much of a lunch. I was bogged down with the quarterly reports.
Me too. Every quarter I say I'm going to stay on top of them, and then...
Bam!
At their booth was a small child who looked like a potato in a diaper with skinny legs and arms and thick glasses.
I got you!
He was holding a small wooden gun, and his potato face cracked open in a smile. His mother ran up and apologized.
I'm so sorry. He got away from me. Won't happen again. Oh, that's fine. Hi, buddy.
Pepper smiled and waved at the little spud.
I promise it won't ever happen again.
The mother ferried the child away.
It's no big deal, really.
Pepper's eyebrows raised, then she looked around.
So, this place is nice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sure is.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Zeboop felt a small flutter by his ear, and then had an idea to stop the awkward moment.
So, Pepper, if you could have any job, anything at all, starting tomorrow, what would it be?
I'd like to be some sort of advocate, maybe for children. I've been thinking of this for a while, really. Don't get me wrong, I like my job well enough, I suppose, but I don't have any sense of purpose or meaning from it. I fill out reports, then I turn them in. Then a new batch of data comes in, and rinse and repeat. But there is so little interaction. On weekends, I volunteer at the shelters and at the children's center. That's where I get my energy from, the hands-on helping others. So yeah, I'd like to do that.
But your reports help people. They give information to the corporate executives who need it.
Sure, but it's just not the same. How about you?
Me? Oh, I'd stay where I am. I love my job. Sure, the quarterly reports stack up, but I like the rinse and repeat. Every day is the same, and I like that predictability. That must sound awfully dull, huh?
No, not at all. For some reason, I think we're all expected to look for and long for these grand adventures. In reality, the lucky ones find grand adventures in their day-to-day life.
Excuse me. Hot plates.
A server set down 2 small plates of food in front of them, and they looked up in surprise. The Furglops requested to share part of their meal with them. So Pepper looked over at Mrs. Furglop, who smiled and waved a claw. Pepper smiled and waved back, mouthing,
Thank you.
What would you like to drink?
Tab, please. I love Tab. It not only saved our planet, but it tastes great.
At the word tab, nearby patrons raised their cola cans in recognition and cheered.
Tab!
This concludes part 1 of our story. We will begin part 2 after a public service announcement from Scam University. Time for a Scamverse history lesson by me, Professor Phineas L. Bumbletruss. It is a well-known historical fact that the Death Tyrants, a corrupt and despicable gang of murderers, crave Tab Cola. But instead of buying their own, they hop their large destruction tanks from planet to planet demanding all the Tab Cola. If a planet is unwilling or unable to amass enough Tab Cola for the Death Tyrant's liking, they are summarily wiped out. That is why any civilization of any intelligence whatsoever not only stockpiles Tab Cola, but would never, ever think of discontinuing it. This has been a Scamverse history lesson. Remember, knowledge is power, and power is everything. And now we return to Family Dining, Part 2. Where were we? Oh, yes. At the word tab, nearby patrons raised their cola cans in recognition and cheered, "To Tab!" Zeboop and Pepper's dishes held dark rice, sautéed vegetables, and a large helping of stir-fried meat. It was clearly spicy as little bits of spice peppers were sprinkled in with everything but the rice. It smelled delicious.
I don't normally care to eat meat, but this smells so good. Shall we?
I don't usually eat meat either.
Pepper said, appraising her date with a warm smile.
But I agree. It's chow time.
She tucked in, and the food tasted better than it smelled. Although spicy, it wasn't too hot, but left a little burn after each bite. The waiter brought tabs just in time by the measure of their watering eyes. As they ate, Pepper waved at the small potato-shaped boy who was being taken back for a tour of the kitchen. His mealy mouth popped open as he fired his toy gun at her.
Bang!
After the first few famished bites, they slowed down and continued their conversation. They talked about music, books, hobbies, their families, and where they grew up. As they talked and ate, Zeboop felt like the world had quieted down so he could enjoy listening to Pepper. He looked around. The restaurant had quieted down. The rowdy noise of children had quieted down. He figured they must be eating now. A young pregnant woman wearing a pink dress and pearls walked up to the table.
Hi, I'm Grace, one of the owners. How is everything?
Delicious.
Wonderful. My husband, Prescott, and I just opened this restaurant, and we want to make sure everyone has a pleasurable dining experience. Can I get you anything else right now? We haven't gotten our menus yet, so that would be lovely, thank you.
Grace tilted her head as if she hadn't heard correctly.
We don't have menus. Simply tell us how you want it cooked, and we'll do our best to accommodate. Oh, that's the kitchen. Please excuse me.
That's odd. I've never heard of a restaurant without menus.
Same. And when we came in, this place was packed with children running around. Now it's quiet.
Oh, they're eating dinner, I suppose.
Where's the children's chairs? All the children. They were running around because they didn't have chairs. Only the parents sat at the table.
Zeboop looked around, and sure enough, there were no children at the tables.
Maybe they have a kids area where they can eat and play. That way the parents can enjoy a quiet meal.
Zeboop offered this, but didn't sound sure of himself.
I saw the waitstaff taking children back to the kitchen for a tour.
They both looked towards the kitchen when out came Prescott, the other owner. He was tall and thin human, who clearly enjoyed meals and was starting a belly. He was smartly dressed in a suit and tie and came out to serve dinner to two potato-shaped parents. Once done, he quickly raced back to the kitchen. Pepper began moving mental puzzle pieces.
Connor's family dining. Connor's family dining.
Zeboop watched this absently and took a bite of his food. As he chewed, he noticed a rubbery texture to a strip of meat. He thought it may have been gristle, but he pulled it out of his mouth and stared. It was a small part of a small yellow bracelet.
Family dining. Family dining.
The penny dropped for both of them at the same time. Pepper looked over at the Furglops. They picked out pieces of bone and bracelets from their large maws and casually tossed them into a metal bucket on the table. The color ran from Pepper's face and her eyes widened.
Family dining. They eat their young. This is a restaurant for species that eat their young.
Pepper was halfway to the door when Mrs. Furglop called out,
Tasty, aren't they? Is your date over so soon?
You, I quit.
Pepper raced through the door with Zeboop on her heels. A cold mist of rain hit Zeboop's and Pepper's faces as they flew out of the restaurant. Zeboop's stomach twisted, as if not knowing what to do with the savage meat it held. Pepper shook in the rain and stared down with wide eyes. Zeboop was not sure if her face had raindrops or tears, but probably a combination of both. They looked at each other briefly, then wordlessly began walking to their cars. This date was over. As they passed an alleyway, Zeboop's stomach decided the best thing to do with the meat was to throw it out. Zeboop lurched into the alley and spewed vomit. The alley didn't have the luxury of fresh rain to rinse away the bile and chunks. Pepper reached into her purse and handed him a tissue.
Thanks. I'm sorry about all this. If I had only researched the restaurant.
Zeboop's hands trembled as he wiped his mouth.
It's not your fault. How could such a horrible place exist? And not to sound selfish, but I quit my job.
Pepper didn't even try to hold back tears.
I'd say more than quit.
Zeboop tried to hold up a smile, but it quivered under the weight of the day and collapsed. Now it was his turn to cry, and there was no rain to wash away these tears, and he didn't care. He was angry. Angry at himself for taking Pepper here, angry at Mox for even suggesting this horrible place. Pepper crouched down next to him.
They were so cute, so innocent. It's almost as if I can hear them laughing still.
Zeboop thought the same. He could hear the laughter of the children, really hear it. Like, really hear it. Where was it coming from? Was this his telltale heart? Had he gone mad? He cocked his head and closed his eyes to concentrate. The sound of the children was coming from the far end of the alleyway, behind a blocked wooden door. Zeboop and Pepper marched down the alleyway. As they drew closer, they heard more children laughing with the sounds of adults shushing them. Zeboop reached the door first and tried to open it, but it was locked. He gave it a hard pull, then a push with all his might, but it wouldn't move. Pepper told him to stand back, and she stormed up to the door and kicked it open. Zeboop would later write in his journal that was perhaps the hottest thing he had ever seen. They entered a small lot in the back of the restaurant. Their eyes widened when they saw all the children from before, still in the same clothes, but minus the bracelets and other odds and ends. A large autobus sat backed into the lot with its back doors open. The driver, a large robotic creature in a jean jacket and cargo shorts, helped a small child with leg braces board. The other children were still singing and playing as they had before, but in shushed tones at the direction of the adults. The little potato child still held his toy gun. He saw Pepper, point and shot, and called out,
Bang!
Pepper laughed loudly. At that, Grace and Prescott saw them and froze in place. You shouldn't be here, said Prescott. Pepper marched straight up to Prescott.
What the hell is going on here?
Yeah,
said Zeboop after a moment, just enough time for it to come off as incredibly lame. Grace, holding her belly bump, walked up to Prescott and took his arm. She sized up the intruders.
You can't be here. What we're doing, if they find out, it could be very bad.
Pepper glared at Grace.
If who finds out? The police? Because trust me, lady, they're going to find out.
After a pause, Zeboop lamely said,
yeah.
He made a mental note to stop doing that. Prescott sighed. You deserve an explanation. We tricked you, and we will be happy to refund your dinner purchase. Which ones are yours? He asked, pointing to the children.
What? No.
This is our first date. We don't have children. My friend from work recommended this place, and we thought we would try it out. We didn't know what family dining meant.
The robotic bus driver tapped Prescott's shoulder. Prescott, we should be going soon. Pepper glared.
Where are you taking them? To another cruel butcher?
Pepper shot anger from her eyes. Grace slid between Pepper and her husband.
Listen, we owe you an explanation, but don't ever call my husband a cruel butcher. Understand?
Grace stared at Pepper sternly, and after a moment she looked away. Grace turned to Prescott.
I've got this. Help the children get out of here.
Grace led Pepper and Zeboop to a small rusted patio table and chairs in the corner of the lot. They had set out small sandwiches and tab for the children.
First off, I promise you these children are safe now. Believe me or don't, but everything we do here is to protect them.
Grace poured herself a tab and slowly lowered herself into a chair.
When Prescott was in college, he studied the behavior of different animal species. That was going to be his graduate studies, but that didn't really work out. Of interest were species that eat their young. In the wild, with limited resources, this could be reasoned as a survival tactic. Cruel, but a survival tactic all the same. What Prescott found disturbing was the continuation of this practice within several species in modern society with abundant resources. Look at these children. These are the ones who need extra support and care.
They observed the children being helped into the bus. They looked small, pale, and sickly. These were the runts of the litter and would be expendable in the wild.
You mentioned cruel butcher. That's exactly where these children are taken. There are butcher shops all around the underground, beyond our reach. Prescott and I couldn't let that barbaric practice continue. What could we do?
After some thought, Pepper answered.
Drive them out of business. Make them obsolete.
Grace smiled.
Exactly. Compete with them and drive them out of business. Give these species an outlet to use what, to their knowledge, is a better service.
But don't hurt the kids. Make dinner a ruse.
We use scraps from a local butcher's shop and throw in little bits of bone to make it seem real for our customers. As far as they know, they are getting what they ordered.
Zeboop raised an eyebrow.
But you're lying to them.
Isn't this a con? Grace paused, then replied patiently.
First, we provide a wonderful dining experience with food they enjoy. I don't feel guilty about charging for the meal. Secondly, that money goes towards funding the children's home we've started. That's where they are headed right now.
She points to the bus, which starts up and pulls out of the lot and down the road. From the back window, the little potato boy waved at Pepper, and she waved back.
We have been able to put together a home where they are safe and loved, but they need much more. There are funds available, but to access them we require a degree of administrative skill that Prescott and I simply don't have. We could really use someone who's good at that type of business to help us help these children.
A long pause followed. Pepper took a sandwich, chewed, and thought. Finally, Grace broke the silence.
I'm sorry we tricked you. This definitely would not be my recommendation for a first date, she said with a gentle laugh. What can we do to make it up to you?
So, you're looking for someone with administrative experience to get more funding for the children's home. Pepper has years of that sort of experience. She is smart, dependable, funny, and kind. I know I've been lucky to work with her.
Pepper looked at Zeboop and smiled, a warm, sincere smile. She turned to Grace and explained her recent job departure and how she was already looking to move towards a career where she could use her business skills for advocacy. Pepper and Grace talked and exchanged contact information to talk the next day about the new job. Grace said goodbye and went inside to check on the customers. Zeboop and Pepper walked back to the alley and to their cars. Pepper excitedly talked about her plans for securing funding for the children's home, and Zeboop found himself suggesting which data reports may be the most helpful. Overall, an incredibly nerdy but happy conversation. He even lent her his notebook so she could jot down ideas while they talked. They reached Pepper's car first. Zeboop smiled.
Thank you for going out with me. I'm sorry it was such a weird date for you.
Oh, this wasn't a weird date. Okay, it started off as a weird date, but this was the perfect date.
Pepper leaned in and gave Zeboop a kiss, then got into her car. When his toes finally uncurled and his mind returned to the planet's surface, Pepper had driven off. He sauntered to his car and drove home, repeating,
"The perfect date,"
all the way. The end. Next week's tale will be The Little Kaiju. Will Mariel meet her prince or stay under the sea? Tune in and find out. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. By joining the Scamverse community, you help put the us in morally ambiguous. Thank you to Scotchy Scotty for additional voice performances, outro music by Cullah, sound effects by Pixabay, music used for background is by artists listed in the show notes. Until next time, keep your eyes on the stars and your hands on your wallets.
There's no